welcome. This is a lunchtime gentle yoga, which means it's just a 30-minute practice. And it's on the gentle end of the spectrum. There's a few things you might want. You might want to have a strap. We're going to use that near the end. A couple of yoga blocks are helpful. We're going to do some lunges. And so these are helpful things. And then at the very end, I'm going to put a pillow under my legs. And if you've got something like that, you can do that. I don't know if you have furry coworkers, but if you do, you can welcome them to your practice in whatever way works best for you. They're not always particularly good at being good yogis, but they're very curious, so they make up for it in curiosity. So if you can sit comfortably cross-legged, do so. If you feel better with a pillow under your hips or a folded blanket, do that. If you need to have the legs out straight, you can do that. Just whatever is the most comfortable position, because we want to get the spine to be mostly neutral, so it doesn't feel like it's rounding back or being pushed forward. And then we're just going to take stock of the body for a moment. So you can go systematically, like piece by piece, but I like to do kind of an overall sense of what my body is feeling like. And are there any places that immediately jump out at me as being a little more tender or sore or in need of some extra care? Sometimes I'll check like left hemisphere, right hemisphere, like is my right shoulder the same as my left shoulder? Does my right hip feel the same as my left hip? Just to see if there are some subtle differences I might want to work with or just be aware of. And once you've done this kind of settling yourself in your body, and without judgment, just notice what is. Then notice your breath. Get a little bit curious about the breath. Like notice what happens when you take an inhale. And then notice the exhale, and let the exhale linger a little bit if you can. The breath is really important, right? And there's a lot of different ideas about the breath, and I'm just going to share my ideas with you, and you can decide what's right for you. But for me, the inhale breath is where I touch my humanness, my humanity, because when that inhale comes in, I feel the bony structures in my body shift. I feel the pelvic floor and the diaphragm both kind of dropping down to receive the breath, which in a seated position like this makes me feel grounded into the earth. And then the exhale feels very light. And I touch my spirit nature, my consciousness, with that lighter sense of the exhale. So the inhale brings me into this kind of human space. The exhale brings me to my soul space. And other things are going on, but those are just a couple of things that I'm noticing in the tendency or the inclination to breathe. Now we're going to do some work for the neck. And the first thing you just want to notice is, does it feel like your neck is in a balanced state? And we're going to drop the chin down toward the chest and just pause for a moment and notice, did the shoulders round over with you? Can you bring the shoulders back down if they did? And it's helpful for me to rest my hands one on each thigh, just to have that weight to help keep my shoulders level. Then we're going to roll the head up and over one shoulder, and as you go, feel that range of motion on both sides of your neck, and then go over the other way. And we're going to go back and forth about 3 more times, just noticing what's there. if you've noticed that there's a particularly sore spot, you can linger with that spot for just a moment if you like. And then when you're ready, when even on both sides, come back to the center. Now there are two muscles on either side of our body that stabilize our head on our neck. So there's this big muscle that comes from the sternum, the clavicle, and the jaw, goes up through the jawbone to the skull. That's the sternocleidomastoid muscle. I might be mispronouncing that. And then there's a muscle in the back that attaches to the top of the shoulder blade and comes up and attaches to the skull. And these two muscles almost make an X, so it's not quite, but it's like scaffolding on a bridge. We've got one muscle that pulls this way, one muscle that pulls that way. The idea is that they're going to evenly support the head. Now, often stressful times lead to these muscles, along with the trapezius muscles, which are these big upper back muscles, shoulder muscles, to becoming chronically tight. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to work with these two muscles. So we're going to drop your head over to the right, and if you drop your head to the right and you feel more stretchy tension on this side, on the left side, then that's the sternocleidomastoid, okay? And some other muscles too, but that's that guy's situation. If you feel it more on the inside, we're going to get to that one later, okay? So we're going to work these two muscles, but just notice, because this will give you things you might want to do later. Okay, so to get to the sternocleidomastoid muscle stretch, we're going to take the head slightly back and a little bit away so that we're pulling this area, ear away from collarbone, okay? And then just hold for a second. You can even drop your left arm out to the side. And I find with neck muscles, it doesn't take much. If I pull my collarbone back a little bit, it gives me a little deeper stretch there. It doesn't take much because they're relatively small muscles and they release a little bit quicker than like the muscles in my hips. All right, so now we're going to come back and we're going to do this levator scapulae muscle, which is the one in the back. So we're going to take the shoulder blade and drop it down, and then bring the back of the skull forward to stretch that guy out. So if when you take your head to one side, you feel more of the pressure on the inside of the curve, this is the muscle that's responsible for that circumstance. So we're going to stretch it on both sides, but just note that for yourself. Okay, bring your left arm back to neutral, and we're going to let the head just essentially drop back into chin to chest position. And then float your head up and see if you notice a difference at all in terms of just what does that shoulder feel like. You might compare it to the other shoulder as well, but more importantly, what's happening there. So for me, there's usually a sense of kind of a little bit of warmth, very pleasant warmth, and a kind of lightness and effervescence to that part of the body. Now that I've put a tension there, it feels a little bit more those things. This side feels a little bit like a bent up pipe cleaner. It's just like a little bit snug. So let's do the other side. So when you're ready, you're going to drop your head to the left. And again, we're going to start with this sternocleidomastoid area. We're going to take the collarbone back. We're going to take the head away from the collarbone. We're just going to stretch back towards the back. And again, you might drop the arm out just to facilitate a little bit more of that. And we're going for this part, like this kind of front part of the neck here. Again, this might not be chronically tight for you, so it might be something that doesn't take long for you to feel nothing at all. Sometimes like sleeping patterns and that sort of thing will land some chronic stress on one side of the body rather than the other. And you can work with that as well. Okay, so we're going to come back a little bit to the center. We're going to pull the shoulder blade down and then drop the forehead forward so that we're getting this muscle up the back of the neck here. Don't forget to breathe. You can linger on the exhale a bit. Okay, take one more breath. Now I could, because that side for me is always tighter, I could stay longer on that side, but I'm going to stop here and just see what's happened. And so automatically that shoulder feels much better. And again, I have that kind of pleasant warmth and a little bit of lightness. If you feel soreness, then be a little bit less aggressive the next time you aim in this into this area, okay? So we're gonna come up to all fours, and we're gonna do some cat shapes, which you know already probably. So rounding and swaying the back. And notice how this more affects the lumbar spine than the middle of the back. So just notice that. Get as best you can, get some movement in your shoulders as well. Now we're going to try to release some tension from our side body. And to do that, we're going to get ourselves into the most neutral spine we can. So find what feels like neutral, and then most importantly, that your neck feels neutral. It's not dropping down, it's not lifting up. It's as close to like ears lined up with shoulders as best you can. And then we're gonna take the head over to the left, take the tailbone over to the left, and then push the right side out. And then come back, try to keep the head level, head to the right, tailbone to the right, push the left side out. We're going to do that a couple more times. Just keep your head as level as you can. Push them out to the side. Push them out to the side. And then we're going to do it one more time, but we're going to hold it. So as we come here, we'll hold for 4 breaths. And you can explore with the inhale, like, can I feel those right ribs stretched out a little bit more? Try to keep your head level. So there's a tendency for me to want to lift my chin, so I'm trying to like fight that tendency. Then come back to neutral, and then we're going to go again. So coming over the other way and stretching out that left rib cage and breathing. Back to the center. Now, we're going to take the right leg forward, and this is where the blocks might come in handy. So we're kind of ease our way a little bit into this kind of stretchiness on the front of the left hip. And then we're going to just lift the hips back so that the knee winds up almost straight, but not quite. So floating forward, and then floating back. Floating forward, floating back. Now we're going to come into the lunge that feels appropriate. So we're going to come to here and pause for a moment, and if you can, come up a little higher, that's fine. You can even bring your arms up overhead if you'd like. I'm just exploring kind of this relationship between my hip and my torso and my low back. Well, how do all of these stretches sort of work together with my breath? Now, on your exhale, go ahead and take your torso down. And again, you can use blocks if they're helpful. Back your hips up until you feel something in this, especially this outer hamstring area. Now, you can pick your toes up as well, or leave the foot more down. That's up to you. Now, I want my weight pretty well centered right over this left knee. So left hip over left knee. And then we're going to take this to the diagonal. So I'm going to take these blocks with me because I find them very useful. So I'm going to put my elbows on the blocks. And stretching to the diagonal brings the stretch away from my outer hamstrings and into my inner ones, along with a little bit of inner thigh. So notice if that's true for you guys. One more breath here. Now this is a little bit of a tricky transition, but we're going to do our best. Have some blocks handy in case you need them. But essentially what we're going to do is sit down. So I'm just going to shift the weight to the ground. Right on. And then I'm going to see if I can open this leg back. Now if this leg is not interested in being in this position, your knee complains, then take that leg out of that position and put it into this position. And this one might be better, and you can even put a little block underneath it or a pillow to make it a little bit more accommodating. So if this feels okay, we're going to get a little bit more onto this top of the thigh here. And then we're going to rotate and go back into the side stretch that we started with the hands and knees position. And I like to play with this little extra rotation and coming out of it because there's a bunch of different muscles, and this is where straps could come in handy. So you can lasso your foot so you have something to kind of hold on to as you rotate and open. And then some people can hold on to the foot itself, and that's fine too. Now, I'm going to take my arm and reach it out, take my head and let it fall back, and see how that works. So now I'm just turning the head in relationship to the side stretch. Take one more big breath, find a spot you like. And then we're going to come out of this. So we're going to lean into this right leg, let that left leg straighten all the way out. Give ourselves a moment to feel what happened. And again, if there's soreness, that means you probably shouldn't do that exactly the same way again. But if it feels like, oh, that's kind of weird and interesting and lighter and pleasant, then I take that as a cue that I should try again, right? I might be wrong about this, y'all, but this is my thoughts on the matter. All right, so we're going to come back to all fours. And we're going to bring the left leg forward for the lunge. And again, like, we're just going to pulse a little bit here. So take the hips forward into the lunge, and then pulse back a bit. The blocks, I find the blocks very helpful for that kind of purpose. If you don't have blocks, just use the floor, use your thigh, use a piece of furniture, whatever you got to do. Neighborhood dog, whatever you got. Probably not the dog. No, that was a joke. All right, so then we're bringing the hips forward, and we're going to see if we can lift up a bit and just see how that stretch goes. If you need to stay lower, stay lower. Again, I'm sort of exploring with my breath the relationship of my back and my hip. Take this one more breath here, and then exhale and shift yourself back. And again, you want the weight to stay mostly right over that point, so it's not back by the heel. And then we're folding, and again, you can take the foot up if you like. The more I fold over this leg, the more I feel this in this outer hamstring area. So that's what I'm kind of aiming at right now. I invite you to do the same. Okay, so now we're going to go for this inner hamstring area. So coming around this way. And I like to go elbows closer to the floor, but you can stay just with your hands if that works best. Now, 2 more breaths here. And if you already know that you're going to want to do this thing the other way, you can start moving yourself into position for that. And if you liked that gate pose option that we did last time, you'll just bring yourself into a seated position. The foot can come as close as it's willing to come, the thigh back as far as it wants to go. And again, you can use a strap to lasso onto your foot if you like. And so I'm going to explore some angles with my ribs first. I'm just letting my head kind of mostly stay connected to the rib cage. Then I'm going to pick a spot there, reach the arm out the other way, and now I'm going to work with just my head. So just turning the head You don't have to go fast. It can be even slower than what I'm doing right here. I'm mostly just doing it with the breath. Inhaling one direction, and exhaling the opposite direction. And then find a sweet spot. And take one more breath. And then come all the way up. We're going to readjust the legs here. Unwind everything. And again, just kind of take a moment and sit and feel where that landed you. Now there's a kind of, I don't know where this started really, to be frank, but there's this yoga lore that suggests that forward bending shapes are calming during times of anxiety. I feel like with all of these ideas, you should test them. So one of the things I like to do when I've done an asymmetrical sequence, where I've done one side and then the other, is I like to put it together with a symmetrical pose. So the symmetrical pose that I'm going to do is this kind of loose bound angle shape. So rather than pull my feet right up against as far up as I can, I've created more of a diamond here. This gets me into the territory of the tortoise pose, but I'm going to do it more like a bound angle. So you could do straight out legs or straight legs but closer together. You pick your pose. Just the same thing on both sides. And then I'm going to do some things with my head and neck, specifically so that I pay attention to this relationship that I've got between my head and my spinal vertebrae, okay? So my tendency when I come into a pose like this is to drag myself forward with my breastbone. That's my tendency. The problem is that jacks my head back. I don't know why it does, but for some reason bringing myself forward with my breastbone also makes me want to lift my chin. So I could just be conscious of that. Or I could decide that I'm going to put the emphasis on this space right at the occipitals where my skull meets my first vertebrae. And instead of dragging myself forward from my breastbone, I'm going to lengthen myself from there and then bring that bone forward into space. Okay? So that I'm creating length through my whole back and only going as far forward as I can keep that length in the back of my skull. So try it that way and see what happens when you do it. Don't add any tension to the body there. Just notice what happens if you have an inclination there towards that. I don't know if they want to hear you breathing into the microphone. I love you. I love you. So we're going to take 2 more breaths, yogis. Probably going to still sniff the microphone. The microphone alone. We're going to take a big inhale and come all the way up. Straighten out your legs and give them a little zhuzh. Now, a lot of times with the gentle or with the lunchtime yoga classes, I don't do Shavasana. But today we're going to do Shavasana because I think we could all use it. At this point in our lives, we could use as much of an opportunity to really let go and relax and be human and be ourselves as possible. So I've put a pillow down. I'm going to put my legs over the pillow. And then one of the places that we really want to pay attention. Now we've done all this work for the back of our skull, and the reason is that right here at the point where our skull meets our neck, and the places where these muscles that we worked on earlier tug, is where all of the cranial nerves that are responsible for our ability to connect to each other, to feel whole, to feel at ease and at peace, they all live right there, friends. And if we've got chronic tension there, it's harder for us to connect to each other and to feel that depth of community. And so do what you need to do to make the back of your skull gently supported in your Shavasana. So I'm going to use a blanket, but I'm going to do a very thin layer and just put it right under my occiput, so that there's just a little cup right there to hold me. Now, if you don't have any props, don't worry about it. Just lay down. It'll be all right. Just organize your head. Okay? So all I'm going to do with this guy is I'm just going to cup that area. So I've got like the tiniest little hug, and then I'm going to put my head down. And then organize here. Take a deep breath, yogis, and then linger on your exhale and let it all go. Gently, yogis, we're going to take a moment just to notice the breath. Take a breath so deep you can feel it down to your toes. Let it go with a big wiggle your fingers and toes because that feels really nice. Let's stretch them out. Give your wrist and ankles a little movement. Stretch your whole body. Bring your knees in. Give yourself a little back massage. And then we're going to come to a seated position one way or another. So taking care of ourselves in this particular way, like helping to relieve tension from our body, especially from certain areas of our neck and shoulders where most of us carry our stress, is actually an act of kindness to the rest of the world. Because if we don't have full access to that nerve activity, it's harder for us to feel calm, peaceful, and connected to each other. So self-care in this case, a real act of community care. So let's take a big breath as a community and let go with a big, and wish you the rest of your day wonderfully. Namaste. Thanks, you guys.